Welcome to the Divorce the IRS podcast, the retirement income planning podcast designed specifically for those who want to pay the least amount of taxes possible and build a retirement income that lasts. Inspired by the best-selling book, Divorce the IRS, you get to go behind the scenes with financial planner, author, and speaker Jimmy Miller. Learn how to set yourself up to pay the least amount of taxes in retirement when you'll need your money the most. And now, here's your host, Jimmy Miller.
Welcome to episode 31 of the Divorce the IRS podcast. Today, we're going to discuss our second case study. This one is a bit more complex than Mary's situation in the last episode and involves a couple who are a lot closer to retirement than the beginning of their career. They also find themselves with a bit more in their pre-tax accounts than is ideal. Now, I hope that lots of young people will read my book or listen to this podcast, follow its advice, and easily be able to save as much money from the IRS as Mary did in our first case study. It's likely, though, that many people won't be able to apply all the principles from the start of their career. But that's okay, since the principles of this podcast can be cleverly applied to almost any situation or age. Let's learn about our example couple for this case study, Bob and Helen. Bob and Helen are both 50 years old and have always been savers, but being busy living their lives, they haven't taken the time to fully understand taxes or focus on a specific retirement plan. They both have great careers that they love, and each makes $120,000 a year. This puts them squarely in the 24% marginal tax bracket. They've been putting 10% of their salaries into their traditional 401ks every year since they were both 30 years old, and have rolled those accounts over into their IRAs each time they changed companies. They would like to be done working and start traveling the world at age 65. Here's what they have now. They have $500,000 in each of their IRAs, so $1 million in total in IRA accounts. Plus, they each have $250,000 in their traditional 401ks at work, for a total of $1.5 million in tax-deferred retirement account assets. Plus, they have $120,000 in a regular non-qualified joint mutual fund account. Bob and Helen also have a mortgage on their home that is set to be paid off at the same time they would like to retire at age 65. Now, they decide to be serious about reaching their retirement goals by the age of 65, so they meet with a fiduciary financial planner who specializes in tax-free retirement planning to craft a plan. Let's break down that plan and what they should do step by step. Step 1. They need to stop contributions to the traditional 401ks. See, Bob has access to a Roth 401k at his workplace, so he starts by switching his 10% contribution to the Roth option and away from the traditional 401k option. This decreases his take-home pay by the amount he was saving, or as I like to say, borrowing from the IRS in taxes, which is about $240 a month. But Bob feels he can absorb that small dip in his monthly pay without a problem. Going forward now, all of his contributions, $12,000 a year, will now be fully owned by him, and there won't be an IRS lien on the money he contributes to the Roth 401k plan going forward. Helen's employer does not offer a Roth 401k option, which is rare these days, but they are out there. But they do allow after-tax contributions into the plan. So Helen redirects her 10% contribution from the traditional 401k option into the after-tax plan option. This also decreases her take-home pay by the amount she was saving in taxes, or taking loans from the IRS, as I like to say, which was also $240 a month. But she also feels she can live with her new take-home pay amount. She understands that this is an easy way to boost her retirement savings, as we discussed in the first few episodes of this podcast. Now, step 2 is Roth conversions. Both Bob and Helen can start converting their IRAs into Roth IRAs, as there are no income limits or restrictions in doing so. They will owe taxes, though, on every dollar they convert. Working with their new tax-free retirement planning specialist, they come up with a plan to start converting $50,000 from each of their IRAs every year into their new Roth IRA accounts and will pay the tax on the money they convert now. They understand they will have to pay the tax on all this money someday anyway, and they feel comfortable paying it now at their known 24% tax rate. They do not feel that tax rates are likely to decrease for them in the future. By converting $100,000, $50,000 each, they remain under the $403,550 threshold that would put them into the 32% tax bracket based on 2026 tax rates. So their income now looks like this. $207,500 from their combined taxable salaries after applying their standard deduction, plus $100,000 from the amount they're converting from their IRAs to their Roth IRAs, plus, let's say, $10,000 of interest and growth from their mutual fund account. That totals $317,500 of total taxable income, which is under that $403,000 threshold that defines the 32% tax bracket at 2026. This conversion will increase their tax burden each year by $24,000 since they are in the 24% tax bracket. They plan on paying this extra tax bill from their non-qualified regular mutual fund account, as we'll see in the next step. So step 3 is to reduce the Tax Me Now non-qualified regular investment account, also called a brokerage account. See, Bob and Helen understand they have more than they need in their non-qualified regular mutual fund account. They both have stable jobs, and they feel that about $50,000 in this account would suffice as an emergency fund and keep them feeling comfortable. So this leaves about $75,000 they can shift from this account to help them with their overall retirement plan. They direct this money, $24,000 a year, towards paying that tax bill on the Roth conversion strategy from step 2 over a 3-year period. Now, step 4 is a 72T conversion strategy once the regular investment account is down to $50,000. See, the money in the non-qualified regular brokerage account was used over the last 3 years to pay the tax bill on the conversions from step 2. But after 3 years, the money to pay the tax bills ran out, as Bob and Helen wished to keep some money in their non-qualified regular brokerage account as an emergency fund. So over the 3 years of conversions, Bob and Helen were able to move $300,000 from their IRAs to their new Roth IRAs. Their Roth accounts have also started the 5-year rule clock, and they only have 2 years left now until they satisfy this rule, and the money they converted can be withdrawn without taxes or penalties. They still have $700,000 though in their IRAs that they would like to convert to their Roth accounts. They don't want to use the accounts to pay the taxes, as this would also trigger the 10% early withdrawal penalties, since they're still both under 59 and a half years old. This would negate the value of the strategy, so they decide to use a 72T strategy to access their IRA accounts without the 10% penalty. They would like to remain in the 24% tax bracket, so they structure the strategy like this. Bob sets up a 72T, called Substantial Equal Payments Plan, on the remaining $350,000 in his IRA. This allows him to withdraw about $12,500 a year from his IRA without having to pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty. He will have to continue this plan and take out the $12,500 each year for at least 5 years or until he's 59 and a half, whichever period is greater. Bob will be required to stay with this plan until he's 59 and a half, as that is the longer period of time in this example. The new $12,500 that Bob now has access to each year gives him and Helen the ability to continue the Roth conversion strategy on Helen's IRA and to pay the extra tax bill with the money Bob is receiving from his 72T plan. This new income will now allow Helen to convert $50,000 each year, and the $12,000 in taxes can be paid for with Bob's 72T plan money. The couple does this until age 60, when they no longer have to continue the 72T plan, and Helen's IRA has now been completely converted to her Roth IRA. Now, Bob still has around $300,000 in his traditional IRA, the one that he'd been taking the 72T money from. And that brings us to step 5, which is more conversions. Now that the couple is older than 59 and a half, Bob can stop the 72T payments. He's eligible to access his IRA without any 10% early withdrawal penalty now. He can now start converting the rest of his traditional IRA to his Roth IRA and use some of the money from the withdrawal to pay the tax as he goes. The couple still wants to remain in the 24% tax bracket. This way, Bob can convert $100,000 a year from his IRA to his Roth IRA and use some of the converted money to pay the extra tax bill. Since Helen is done converting, they stay in the 24% tax bracket. Now, step 6 is Helen retires. So let's say in this example at age 63, Helen is downsized at work. She decided that she's had enough anyway and would like to retire ahead of the original plan of retiring at 65. She rolls her traditional 401k from her work over to her now empty IRA and transfers her after-tax contributions from the account at her work into her Roth IRA. This is the final step in the mega backdoor Roth strategy we discussed in an earlier episode. Now, without Helen's income from work, the couple has even more room in the 24% tax bracket to apply the Roth conversion strategy to Helen's IRA again. They convert and pay the taxes on her IRA over the 2 years remaining until they both fully retire at age 65. Now, step 7, Bob retires. And now that the couple are both 65 and full retirement is here, let's take a look at what they have. So now they have $2 million in Helen's Roth IRA, plus no money left in Helen's traditional IRA, which was pre-tax, as she managed to convert everything over the past 15 years. There's now $1.9 million in Bob's Roth IRA, which is $100,000 less than Helen's because of the 72T payments that he took. Plus, they have $500,000 in Bob's traditional IRA pre-tax, as he never got all of his old traditional 401k money converted before they retired at 65. And they still have that $50,000 in the non-qualified mutual fund account as an emergency fund. So this totals $4,450,000 of total assets at age 65, with only about $500,000 of that in the tax-deferred bucket. So let's take a look now at how they structure their retirement income. Bob and Helen have done well restructuring their assets and shifting money from the tax-deferred bucket to the tax-free bucket as they approach retirement. Let's take a close look at their income stream in retirement and compare the extra tax they paid over the past 15 years to what they will save over the course of their retirement now. Do you think what they did was worth it? Well, let's start by looking at their ages 65 to 69. During this portion of retirement, Bob and Helen will hold off on taking their Social Security, so it'll continue to grow until they reach age 70, when they'll be eligible to receive their maximum benefits. Bob and Helen can now take out $35,500 from Bob's traditional IRA and receive this money tax-free by applying the standard deduction. This is the 2026 standard deduction plus the extra $1,650 standard deduction per person for seniors. They're going to have too much income to also take the extra $6,000 Trump standard deduction, though. The amount of the standard deduction is also linked to inflation, so it will rise over time. But the key point here is they take out as much as they can deduct with their standard deduction each year. And they can now take out as much from their Roth IRAs as they would like without the worry of taxes. But they want to be extra conservative and decide to follow a 3% rule for withdrawal instead of the more popular 4% rule. They'll also take a 3% raise each year to keep up with inflation. They're also interested in leaving a legacy to their church and a charity one day, so they'd like to have some money left over at the end of their lives for that as well. So this gives them $117,000 of income from the Roth accounts. That's a 3% withdrawal from that $3.9 million balance. Their income at age 65 is now $152,500. $35,500 from the IRA, which they wiped out the taxes with by the standard deduction, and $117,000 from the Roth accounts, all tax-free. This is actually more take-home income than they had while they were working. So they have an increase in their standard of living as they move into full retirement. Here is what Bob and Helen were taking home each year while they were working. Well, they both made $120,000 a year, so combined income from work was $240,000 a year. But they were both putting $12,000 or 10% a year into their 401ks. So that's subtracting $24,000. They owed $11,720 on FICA tax on their income, which was Social Security and Medicare taxes. They also owed about $40,000 a year in federal tax in the 24% marginal tax bracket, and they paid an effective rate of 16.71 while they were working. Now, they also owed almost $10,000 in state tax, and I'm just assuming Colorado was an example here with a 4.63% state tax. And they had a small mortgage, which was set to be paid off, and they paid it off when they retired at age 65. But let's just say that was another $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. So if you subtract all those standard deductions, the Roth contributions, the 401k contributions, the FICA tax, the federal tax, the state tax, mortgage payment, they were actually bringing home about $130,000 a year annual take home while working. So now that they're in retirement, they're getting $152,000 completely tax-free. So they're actually getting more take-home income than they were when they were working. Well done. Now, the next step at age 70 is Social Security. Bob and Helen will each receive, for this example, let's say $2,500 a month, $30,000 a year each, for a total of $60,000 a year from Social Security as benefits. Now, half of this benefit eats up most of their threshold of allowable provisional income before Social Security starts becoming taxable. For a married couple, 50% of their Social Security benefits become taxable once provisional income reaches $32,000. So there isn't much room to withdraw from Bob's IRA now and utilize the standard deduction to receive this money tax-free. Bob and Helen are also aware that RMDs are right around the corner and they will be required to take money from the traditional IRA. The RMD amount would put them over the threshold, and that would cause their Social Security to no longer be tax-free. So let's see what they do. For now, before they start RMDs, even with Social Security, they are still income tax-free and receive now $197,000 in tax-free income. And how that's made up is $135,000 from Roth withdrawals. Remember, a 3% withdrawal rate, and they've been increasing it by 3% each year for inflation. So it's $135,000 from their Roth withdrawals. They're getting $60,000 of Social Security income. And they take $2,000 now from Bob's IRA, which is offset by the standard deduction. And this brings them right up to, but not over, the provisional threshold for making their Social Security taxable. So that equals $197,000 of total income tax-free. This is over $5,000 more each month than they took home while they were working, all tax-free. Well done, Bob and Helen. Now, next, let's consider some gifting strategies. Bob and Helen are thrilled with the almost $200,000 a year of totally tax-free income and are living their best lives. They've decided they do not want to give any money to the IRS, though, and nothing would please them more than to start gifting their tax-deferred money to their church and charities while they're still around. They want to see their money put to good use while they are still alive. Once they are mandated to begin RMDs from Bob's IRA at age 73, they choose to gift those RMDs directly to charity, allowing them to exclude the income and not pay taxes on the money. They do this by having their advisor send the RMD payment directly to the charities, so no money passes through Bob and Helen. This also allows them to keep control of what's left in the IRA and gift just the RMD amount each year. This is just in case they need the extra money for something important, such as long-term care down the road. So how did they do? That's really the question. The big question is, was all that planning, shifting, and paying taxes early really worth it? Well, Bob and Helen did pay a lot of taxes from age 50 to 65 by following this plan. However, they paid the tax on their terms in a strategically controlled way and at known tax rates they were happy with. Let's look at how much they paid in taxes and lost in tax deductions before they reached retirement. They paid $72,000 in taxes for Step 2, which was the first round of converting to Roth accounts. They also paid $105,000 for the cost in Step 4, which was the 72T withdrawals and conversions. They paid another $72,000 in taxes for the cost of more conversions in Step 5, and $96,000 in taxes in Step 6, when Helen retired and converted her old 401k to a Roth account. This totals $345,000 in taxes paid. But we also have to include the lost tax deductions the couple missed out on when they switched from the traditional pre-tax 401k contributions to the Roth and after-tax contributions. This came out to another $80,640 in lost tax deductions, which was the Step 1 costs. So that is a total cost, taxes, and lost deductions of $425,640 total tax and deduction costs. Now, some people will point out that if they had stayed on their original path, they would have had more money in their accounts when they retired than they ended up with under this plan. This is because they wouldn't have paid that extra $345,000 in taxes or lost out on the tax deductions they were receiving. And this is totally true, and it's a great point, so let's consider it. If you added all the extra taxes Bob and Helen paid before retirement back into their plan, plus the growth on this money, we can calculate they would have had about $500,000 more under the old plan at age 65. This means they would have had a balance of about $5 million, rounded up to be even more conservative, in their tax-deferred accounts instead of the $4.45 million they ended up with. Now, how would that have worked out for them? Well, had they stayed on the original path and not Roth converted or lost any of the deductions and ended up with a $5 million retirement account balance, they would have owed a lot of taxes over the course of their retirement. A little over $800,000 worth of taxes is what it would have added up to over a 25-year retirement from ages 65 to 90. And that doesn't consider that tax rates could go up, or what would have happened if one spouse passed away before the other, leaving the surviving spouse with the widow's or widower's penalty, and in the single tax brackets, paying even more taxes. You can see a chart of what the taxes would have been for this couple each year in the Divorce the IRS book, if you want to grab a copy and take a look. But to break it down a bit more, the 3% withdrawal on the $5 million would have been about $150,000 in their first year of retirement. After applying their standard deduction, federal taxes owed would have been about $16,000, and their actual spendable income would have only been about $133,000. That's $19,500 less than what they had tax-free under the new plan. That's a difference of over $1,600 a month in retirement income. This gap would have only grown each year of their retirement, and once you added in Social Security and state tax, they would have paid a lot more in taxes. It's not even close. As you can see, the $345,000 they paid in extra tax leading up to retirement, as well as the $80,000 they gave up in tax deductions, was more than worth the savings of over $800,000 in just federal taxes during retirement. If you calculate the state taxes they would have owed, assuming they live in a state with state tax, and consider the fact that 85% of their Social Security income would have also been taxable at 22% and 24% under their old plan, and they would have owed $11,000 a year in tax just on their Social Security the first year they received it at age 70, it's apparent the new plan was massively in their best interests. This also doesn't count the substantial tax savings they received by gifting to charities and the tax-free legacy they will leave at the end of their lives. Bob and Helen won't be paying tax from the grave, as we learned about in Tax Time Bomb 8. Now, what would have happened if tax rates had increased somewhere along the way during Bob and Helen's retirement? This would have dramatically increased their tax bills and compounded the negative effects had they continued on their original path. With the new plan, any tax rate increase would have no effect on their income. The last point worth making in this case study is Tax Time Bomb 7, which I've already just touched on, and it happens when the first spouse passes. Had one partner passed sometime during retirement, the remaining spouse would have lost only one Social Security check worth of income and nothing else, because the remaining accounts would have been combined into the surviving spouse accounts without taxes, and income would have continued unaffected by the new single tax brackets or lower standard deduction. Had this happened under the couple's original plan with everything in tax-deferred accounts, it would have been a much bigger tax problem for the remaining spouse to deal with. Now, in this case study, we saw that even though Bob and Helen started planning for retirement when they were closer to the finish line rather than the starting line, they were still able to use the principles in this podcast. With careful planning, they diffused the tax time bombs that threatened to explode their savings and were able to keep significantly more money from the IRS to enjoy in retirement on their terms. However, neither Bob nor Helen had a problem that you might face. Neither of them had a pension, which we'll discuss in the next episode and what to do about it. So stay tuned for that.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to navigate your financial life? Check out all the resources on the Divorce the IRS website at divorce-the-irs.com or the Baobab Wealth website at baobabwealth.com. and subscribe to the blog to stay up to date on issues affecting retirement income planning. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Baobab Wealth and Baobab Wealth Abroad are DBAs of Baobab Wealth LLC, a Florida registered investment advisor. This podcast is designed for general education purposes only and shouldn't be taken as legal, investment, or tax advice. You should seek out a qualified tax professional or licensed financial advisor to determine what is best for your personal situation.